All right, folks. We have Pastor Adrian is getting us set up tech-wise, it looks like, and then she's going to do at least double duty, if not triple or quadruple, because that's just the life of the pastor type, going to welcome us officially to St. Thomas Lutheran Church. So here she comes. So thanks, Adrian.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to St. Thomas. It's certainly our honor to host you all this afternoon. Church is such a morning place. I always forget that. Just so you know, if you need to use the restroom, go out these doors and turn to your right, and they are on your left. And then after our time here with the panel, we'll have some time for discussion, and that'll be in Heritage Hall, which is out these doors and down that hallway on your right until you can't go any further. And so welcome. And if there's anything you need, I'm happy to help. I have to go for a violin and piano recital. And so Kathleen Bogus and Ellen Mills are also my co-hosts for today, and thank you to them. Thank you for this honor. So welcome.
Thank you, Adrian. And thank you all for being here. I'm Reverend Jessica Peterson Mutai. I serve First United Church, which is actually just down the road from here. And I get to serve as the facilitator of the Bloomington Multi-faith Alliance Faith for Racial Equity Committee. It's a very, very long name, but we are about some very good work, and we are very glad to have you all here with us today. Show of hands quickly. Folks on the live stream, sorry, I can't see your hands. How many of you had the opportunity to read Matthew Desmond's Poverty by America? Quite a few of you. Fantastic. We will be having some little quotes and things like that throughout our time together here, but I don't feel like I have to give you a full overview. Obviously, he talks about poverty in America, and not even just in America, but this is something that is created by people intentionally, and that many of us, myself included, am a beneficiary and somebody who helps to maintain this system, and doesn't put it all on the poor, right? So many books that we've read and that we have seen come out about poverty are about the people who are living in poverty and what they need to do to make their lives better. So Desmond obviously focuses on what poverty looks like, because he says we really need to see that, we need to talk about that and be aware of it, and then turns all his attention, the rest of the book, to what's causing it, and oftentimes some of these underlying causes that we are not very much aware of. So we're going to sort of tease some of those pieces out as we look at poverty by Bloomington, and not just say, oh, this is something, this is a problem from people out there, you know, the big cities or the really small rural areas that have all of these big problems. This is a challenge that's right here. This is a reality here in Bloomington, and to call ourselves to account and to start building some power. That's one of the things I really appreciate about Desmond's work, is that he doesn't say, this is the problem. He also talks about what some possible solutions, some ways forward are, and this is one of those first steps for us to gather here and actually move forward and take some action together. So we are blessed, we are privileged to have with us a wonderful panel that said yes. These were the first 4 folks I asked, and they all said yes. That almost never happens in my looking for volunteer experience. I don't know if any of you are ever in that place, but I am grateful, I am glad. Thank you for showing up. I am going to let them introduce themselves and speak to which organizations in our town that they are connected with. And they are not here as experts. They are not here to solve all of our poverty problems in Bloomington, but they are here to be conversation partners with us, all of us here today, as we look for a way forward. So before we get any further, I will invite you all to introduce yourselves, and then we're going to have some questions directed toward the panel that they will each respond to, and then we will have a time of open conversation that will continue, as Adrian alluded to, in Heritage Hall, where we'll have some refreshments and things like that as well. So that's kind of the flow of the day. We are hoping to be out of here by 4, out of here by 4, and on to continuing the work. So thank you for being here, and Katie, I'll invite you to start.
Well, thank you so much for having me on this panel. My name is Katie Broadfoot. I am the Executive Director of Monroe County United Ministries, which is a nonprofit organization serving Monroe County. We provide resources to families that are experiencing intergenerational poverty. So we serve the younger generation through our accredited licensed early learning center, and then the caregiving generation through our self-sufficiency center, which focuses both on basic needs assistance as well as longer-term poverty alleviation efforts.
Hi, my name is Asia Juster. I am a member of Thriving Connections, which is a group through SCCAP, South Central Community Action Program. I am currently experiencing poverty and am really excited to be here and share some firsthand experiences as well as my views on the book.
Thank you also for hosting this panel. Really glad to be here. My name is Donielle Bird, and I'm a longtime community social worker here in Bloomington, and I'm here representing New Leaf, New Life, but I've also had many different roles in the community, contracted with DCS providing home-based services, also as a school social worker and an adjunct at Indiana University School of Social Work for 12 years. But right now I'm representing New Leaf, New Life, and it's a small nonprofit organization in our community, and what they do is help support people who are currently and formerly incarcerated and those who have had criminal legal system involvement. We have material support, we have staff that helps people with applications for sober living, for housing, for getting their IDs and birth certificates, and just a lot of case management. And also we have some workshops in the jail, reentry planning, and we work with parents with the Read to Me program with a library, and help them record books for their children so that their family members or children can hear their parent reading them a book. So really glad to have this discussion today. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Forrest Gilmore, and I'm the Executive Director of Beacon, which is a housing and homeless services provider in our community. We specialize in people with extreme poverty and focus on things like life essentials, meals and shelter and such, but also emphasize solutions with, in particular, really focusing on housing and helping people get housed. And we're a housing first organization, which means we gear all of our work with people experiencing homelessness to that move into housing and to help them move into housing as quickly as possible. So I think that's where our kind of intersection is with poverty and with the community, is particularly on that housing side.
Adrian's right hand. Is this one? Oh.
Is it?
Oh no. We can swap them too if we need. There we go. It's on, yeah. Hi everyone, we're so grateful you're all here, and we're really grateful to all of our panelists and for the many different experiences that they bring. My name is Reverend Kelly Jepson. I'm at First Presbyterian Church. I'm co-hosting here with Reverend Jessica as part of the Bloomington Multi-faith Faith for Racial Equity. We'll get you to get that one down by the time you leave. I know for me, reading this book felt like a mirror sometimes, of pointing right at me and opening me up to new ideas. I read one review of the book that called it tiny and fierce, and I felt like that was a really good way of thinking about it, a quick read, but also something that you continue to chew on. I'd love to hear about each of your experiences in reading this book, kind of what struck you or stood out to you, and do you feel like it resonates with your experience here in Bloomington? And we'll start here with the stronger mic.
Okay. Oh, yes, this one's definitely on. All right, so my knee-jerk reaction reading the book was that it made me very uncomfortable, and I just really hated that about it, but also that was kind of the point of the book. I thought that the author did a nice job in the way that he described poverty as a constant piling on of problems. And for the 10 years that I've been working at MCUM, it has been my experience that people who come to our agency, and I'm sure many of the others represented here and not, there can be many challenges that people are facing, and you never know, in our case, or a lot of times you don't know where that person's point of entry into the social service system is going to be, and so sometimes it can be very difficult to help them untangle that. And so the book really hit home to me, that the complexity of the situation. And yeah, I thought that he tied so many moving pieces into this big complex issue, and even the way that he discussed how people who aren't experiencing poverty, or perhaps even people that are supporting staying in poverty by the choices that we make. And he talked about small things, as far as where we shop, or choosing between UPS and FedEx as far as who we're going to choose to mail things. And that's something that it made me stop and pause and think about it. And like I said, I think that was the point of it. So I would agree with the tiny but fierce comment for sure.
I guess one of the things that resonated with me most when reading the book was how real it was written. Usually books on this topic are written in a very academic style, and this was just really down to earth, plain and simple. And I really, while I was reading the book, I could relate to a lot of the issues in the book. So being able to see what I'm experiencing written out and explained out was really, it was kind of mind-blowing for me. And I guess ever since I started reading it, I've just been talking about it and talking about it, because to have the words to articulate all the things, I do a lot of trying to understand the system of poverty, and this was just really helpful in helping me to find the words.
Thank you, Aisha. I forgot to mention that I'm also part of Thriving Connections as an ally, and I've gotten to know a lot of great folks who are sitting in this room right now from that organization. But and also I'm a board member of New Leaf New Life, so I'm not doing the actual work. I forgot to mention that earlier. But this book was, and I was talking to Forrest a little bit before we started our panel, is I didn't want to say it made me happy, because it's really not a happy book, but what I enjoyed about it is that it compiled so much of my professional and lived experience together in one place. So I have been on a journey myself personally, and understanding opportunity hoarding, and I've enjoyed the benefits of, unfortunately, of people experiencing poverty. I am one of those people that has the mortgage exemption. I've lived in a segregated neighborhood. My children went to segregated schools here in Bloomington. And I'm also on a board of a homeowners association. I'm sure everybody who's participated in that loves it, right? And so, for me, and I look back on decisions that I made in my life throughout my time here in Bloomington, which has been a long time. I have changed a great deal, and I think it's always okay for us to say, wait a minute, we want to hold that mirror up, and we need to be uncomfortable, and we need to examine our decision making and our policies that we support, and the ways in which we interact with our friends, our neighbors, and our family members. And to me, I don't deal with cognitive dissonance real well. And so that discomfort has really pushed me personally to change, and it's also committed me to being involved in Bloomington in ways that have, quite honestly, made me lose some friends. And I've disagreed vehemently with some social work colleagues about some issues. And I do that with very careful consideration based on equity. And I'm sure that some of the things I have to say today might disappoint or frustrate somebody here in the audience. So I'm just, somebody said, oh, I've seen you on social media. I was like, oh, yeah. So I'm really outspoken about equity. And what really stood out to me also about this book, in addition to just helping me reflect on my journey, is that Bloomington likes to profess about being progressive and liberal. And when it comes down to the policies I've seen over the years in Bloomington and the things that are not supported, the things that people are the most upset about, are policies that really influence those with more privilege. And we're not willing to give things up. We're not willing to have our kids go to a different school. We're not willing to allow our neighborhoods to have mixed zoning. We're not willing to even accommodate folks in our parks who are houseless or maybe uncomfortable for us, or in our library spaces. So we speak about these things, but in reality, and the thing that stood out to me about Bloomington that frustrates me very much is the opportunity hoarding and the lack of follow through with the things that we profess to care about. And so, as I said, it's not always popular, but I think for me, I feel more centered in my relationships in my life, and really being able to say, I could give that up in my neighborhood, in my community, in my park, and our kids, frankly, were harmed by being in a segregated school. So I wish I could go back and change some things. So anyway, those are what stood out to me.
I have trouble reading books like this because so much of the work is connected to it that it feels like more work and more suffering. And so I'm halfway through, full confession. And I've also read parts of Matthew Desmond's Eviction, which is where I first learned about him. And he's doing something that very few people are doing, which is writing accessible writing about poverty and housing issues, which is amazing to me that there hasn't been much of a literary market for. But he's doing something that there should be a lot more on, because it's such a huge issue. He brings together a lot of what you hear in different places, so I think that's really brilliant of him and very important for him in terms of what he does in the writing. I think probably, it's what whenever you read a book, you come away with maybe a few key learnings that you take with you down the road. And so these are so one of the things that sticks out with me is just this tiny little factoid that he gave, which is that poverty, the amount of anxiety and challenge that it produces is equivalent to going without 24 hours of sleep. And that's very visceral and very powerful, and it was just a couple of sentences, but boom, wow. And so often the critique of people in poverty is they make bad decisions. And regardless of whether that's true or not, people in poverty are operating as if they haven't slept for 24 hours. And I think wherever our financial status is in the room, we can all relate to perhaps not having slept for 24 hours and know what that does to our brains. And can then, that's an access point, an empathy point to an experience that we might not have. And I guess the other thing that I thought was really interesting was at the end of the taxation chapter that he, wrote about how all the taxation is set up in a way to present people as not having benefited from government programs, because it's like you pay less taxes as opposed to you get handed a check, and how that serves middle class and upper class people by helping them feel like they're not benefiting from a government program, but just keeping more of the money that is theirs. And his analysis of why we do that, which is, he came through with several different opportunities, and the last one he mentioned, which I think fits very well with some of the things you just mentioned in terms of Bloomington politics, which was we keep these policies in place because we like them, not because of any great reason or intellectual kind of agreement or disagreement about poverty and what poverty is, but because we like them. And so we want to keep them. We like having our mortgage deductions. We like having to pay less taxes on our health care. We like to have benefits for our, student loans and things like that and such. And so those benefits, even though they predominantly benefit middle class and upper middle class people, we like them, so we keep them. So I thought that was pretty powerful.
Thank you. We're going to check. Is this one working now? Yeah? It's still very soft. I'll just speak right into it. Okay. So then it might be able to go back and forth, back and forth. Thank you all for sharing your initial thoughts. The next point, a jumping off point, that's one of the things as well. Donielle, I appreciate your saying, hey, I might ruffle some feathers here. We're not all going to agree here. This is a jumping off, right? This is a conversation, and this is meant to be very real. And that's why we're bringing it here in Bloomington. And one of the people that I think in the history of this nation, especially fairly recent history, who dared to speak that truth as James Baldwin. In 1961, he talked about, and this is in the book, about how extremely expensive it is to be poor. So we would love to hear you all from your experience here in Bloomington. What does that mean? What does that mean in 2023 in Monroe County, in Bloomington, Indiana? And again, we can pass this mic too if you all want to be really close mic speakers. So, yeah, what do you think?
I think that it means a lot of different things. I think when you think of it being expensive to be poor, the first thought is of resources and, the cost of different things. And so just thinking about here in Monroe County, it's constantly changing, but there are something like 20-some food pantries in the county, and MCUM is one of them, and I think that all of us have the very best and most genuine intentions of helping people, but how helpful is it if someone needs food, a basic need, and they go to one spot and we give them everything that we possibly have to give them, and it's not enough. They have to go to 2 or 3 or 4 other pantries. They have to spend all of that time to go and get that basic need. They also have to spend the resource of transportation to get there, whether that is their own vehicle, a ride from a connection if they have it, or public transportation, which has its shortfalls here as well. I think that he also did a good job hitting on the cost of people's sense of self-worth and dignity, and how much shame and embarrassment there is with being poor and constantly having to prove how poor you are just to get access to a fundamental basic need: food, shelter, hygiene, things that everyone should have. And I thought that the author did a really great job of bringing that into light as well. But I think that, the main outcome for me in reading the book is that if it costs you all of your time, all of your money, all of your self-worth, and your dignity to be poor, or to be anything, that is way too expensive.
Okay, so a little background for me. I am a single mother of 6, and I've lived in Bloomington for just under 10 years now, and ended up here after leaving an abusive relationship. So I like to joke and say that I was blinded by the pseudo-liberalism, that's what I like to call it, of Bloomington, and thought that it'd be a great place to stay and raise my children. I currently have 3 high schoolers and one that graduated last year and an elementary student. And so when I think of how much it costs to be poor, I always like to bring to light how expensive it is for me to allow my children, who are very gifted, all of them are gifted in a unique way, but they're very gifted and very involved. And that is super expensive to me, for me. For me to be a supportive parent, it's quite expensive. Probably would blow your mind when I try to calculate it. I'd say I spend a minimum of $2,000 a year on extracurricular activities. And for me, in my budget, that is kind of crazy. I have students that are athletes, and when you look at my family, I have to spend at least $50, $60 on each athletic event. That's not the cost of them participating. That's not the cost of the equipment. Oh my God, don't talk about shoes. But it's super expensive to do that, and in a public school system. And there's also this pressure to be there, because if you're not there, then you're not a good parent, right? And so, I mean, that's what comes to my mind first when you talk about the expense of being poor. Another area where I experienced that, and I'm just talking like financial right now, is banking. I do choose not to use a traditional bank because in the past I've been jerked around by fees, and it's like the devil you know or the devil you don't know. Like, bank fees will come up and grab you and throw you all the way off. So I do choose to go a more expensive route probably, but with fees that I can predict. Housing, I am fortunate enough to have a Section 8 voucher, but even with that, I do know that what I pay in my portion outside of the subsidy is more than a lot of people pay for their mortgage. And so you still have to live with the stigma of having that voucher, and you're still paying more money. And that's just kind of crazy to me. And those are just a few ways of how I feel like it's expensive to be poor. I'd also like to just piggyback on that, like that emotional cost. I don't know, like I'm always, my brain is always going because I'm always trying to anticipate the next thing, and knowing that if I'm not able, or if I forget one little thing, it can throw so many things off that then I'm working from, like I'm working, I just got a penalty and I'm trying to catch up, and that is like one of the biggest fears, I think. Yes.
You mentioned that you had 6 children.
Yes.
And you got some housing relief from by way of housing vouchers and that. Are you employed? Do you have other financial, income coming in?
Yes, I work full-time. I work as a finance specialist for South Central Community Action Program. I should also add that I was raised middle class, and that I know it's like a thing where you choose to be poor. Well, my choice to be poor was leaving an abusive relationship. So while I do work, I guess that whole wage issue is another conversation, but because of my family size, I'm still far below that poverty line. That also doesn't change.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'm going to focus on, there's so many things I could say. Asia said many of them, also Katie did. So I'm going to try to focus on the criminal legal aspect of things and how, there's a phrase being used now called the poverty to prison pipeline. And, those who are experiencing poverty are more likely to be caught up in the criminal legal system. And I like stories, so I'm going to share a story of a gentleman I worked with a few years ago, and when I was working with DCS. So I was trying to help families get their kiddos home, or get things better in their homes so that their kids could stay there. This gentleman and his wife, they had lost their children, and the kiddos were in foster care, and I was given the referral, and they said, well, this man needs to get his driver's license back, and it has been suspended, and so that'll really be helpful to him in jobs and doing all kinds of things to better the family's life. So I just had this assumption it was a DUI. No. Got to talking with him, and he's like, well, I've got to drive to Indianapolis to get my license reinstated, and I was driving on a suspended license. They arrested me, and the kids went into foster care, and there was no family to take the kids, whatever. And I was like, why was your driver's license suspended? He said, I had a broken taillight. I was like, oh, no, that can't be true. No, it was. He had a warning. He had to go show that he'd fixed his taillight. He was working. He didn't make it there. I don't know, probably had ADHD, like many of us, just didn't happen. I was driving on an expired plate for, I don't know, almost a year, had no idea. Okay, so, and what did I do? They were, I'm a white lady, and and I'm educated, and I whatever, and so I got out of it, right? But this gentleman did not. And so I look at the amount of trauma that those children went through, and the amount of resources that our state and county spent on this issue, which was literally a broken taillight. And these folks and now he's been arrested, now he's got a record, then they want to put you on probation. The fees for getting caught doing something that most of us will get out of are absolutely astronomical. The hoops that folks are asked to jump through, doesn't matter if we're setting them up for failure. They know many times that they're never going to be able to make it out. They're telling them to go day report, and they don't have any transportation, and they live in the county. And I was having a conversation with a local probation officer once, and she says, well, that's not her problem. So it's not making excuses, but it's trying to help folks set people up for success, and they're set up to fail. And then we tell them, oh, we're going to have you do drug screens. Well, how many, there's a lot of people who are functioning well who couldn't pass a drug screen, okay? Or that haven't been in the criminal legal system. So now we're setting them up to get more and more in a hole, and folks just can't get out of it. So people come to New Leaf, New Life, and they said, I've finished all of my court-ordered programs, but I can't pay off this amount of money. And they're like, well, somebody help us pay these fees. And we're on a shoestring. We don't have these donors coming out of the woodwork saying, yeah, we're going to pay off your user fees. And something else that I think is really immoral, the users' fees that people pay to probation go to salaries for probation officers. I'll just let that sit there for a minute. Not to programs, to help people who are stuck in the system or to keep people out. So we're really, pay for the taillight, right? My gosh. And then also I used to teach social work students, and I had a student who was an intern at DCS, and she was working with a family, and they had lost their kids because they needed to do some repairs to their home. It was unsafe. And so because they were involved with DCS, they managed to find some money to make these repairs. And my student said, isn't it sad that they had to have a child protection services involved just to get the help that their family needed to fix their floor of their trailer? We're hitting things backwards. We're not really focusing on prevention. So people get stuck, and a lot of people don't know the daily experiences. A lot of times I've heard people say, well, let's get people out of jail and prison and put them on home detention, because that'll, at least get our jail populations down. The folks who are doing that are stuck paying ginormous, incredible fees. You've got to have internet, you've got to have a home, you've got to schedule a week in advance. You can't to do anything. And heaven forbid you fill out a form wrong. I've got those forms and has seen those, and they're ridiculous. And if you don't pay your fees, you'll be revoked and you'll go back to jail, and then you'll end up having more time in jail than if you just would have just stayed there. I've talked to folks who are like, nah, I'll just sit it out in jail. I don't have the money for that. So anyway, I could go on and on and on. So but one more story, and talking about it's expensive to be poor. I have a family member who was a young mother. She was a teen, didn't finish high school, had her baby, and all of our family had just really pitched together to help her out. She learned that there was a program at Cook that you could go, you could work there, and then they would pay you to get your GED. And her young husband decided he was going to try to do the military, so he was off in some program trying to do the military. She's a single parent, and her kid finally gets to go to daycare, which our family paid for because she didn't qualify or whatever. We couldn't get a kid into Head Start. And so here we are, all trying to help. Her kid, who's never been in daycare before, is now sick all the time. Right? And so we had all done what we could to take the sick kid in for a while, right? She had missed several days of work. The day she passed her GED is the day they terminated her. Okay? So she's still at home with their child and can't work. She got her GED, woo! And that's so tons and tons of barriers for people. So thank you.
I can maybe speak a bit more to the housing side, and I'll just be brief with a couple of stories. But just recently, we helped a family move into a home from homelessness, and we helped them with their security deposit, because we have this program that's what it's specifically designed to do with those startup costs of moving into a home. And because of their income level, the person decided to charge a double security deposit. So the security deposit was $3,200, which is double the rent, So So 1 month's rent was $1,600 a family unit. So so that's an example. Like, how many of those of us who are not in poverty have $3,200 just lying around that you can just have disappear for the length of time that you're in that apartment with no guarantee that you'll get it back at the end? That's a thing. So that's an example. Another example is heating costs, and so if your house, like, so oftentimes people who are in poverty live in substandard housing, so they will have bad insulation, or maybe even a broken window or something like that, or a really outdated furnace that doesn't have high efficiency, or window-based AC units instead of central AC. And so all these things make it a lot more expensive. So they have, so they're paying $500, $600, $800 or more a month in utilities, just because the house is poorly sealed up. So, and just for context, so in my own home that I bought in, I think, 2016, 17. So right now I pay $700 for a 3-bedroom home, 1,000 square foot 3-bedroom home, $722 or something a month, which includes the taxes and the mortgage. I pay $12 a month in electric because I was able to afford to invest in solar panels. So I have no electric costs except for just the hookup costs. And so that's a context. And my wage is about median wage for the community, and how much of a difference that is. I mean, I would love to be able to pass on a $12 utility bill to all the folks that we work with, and we can't because the systems are set up to make that really expensive. So those are just some easy, quick examples.
Thank you all for the multitude of examples and personal examples as well. Desmond, in his book, urged us all to become poverty abolitionists, is the term he used, and he suggested that we do that by taking action to rebalance our social safety nets. He also suggested empowering the poor by reining in exploitation and investing in broad prosperity by turning away from segregation. He states that poverty abolitionists seek to divest from poverty in our consumer choices, investment decisions, and jobs, and to support a government actively striving to end scarcity. That's from the book. So what specific efforts do you think will make a big difference in reducing, if not abolishing, poverty? And where should we be putting our efforts as a community and individually? We would love to come to a community consensus on where and how we might be able to make an impact here in Monroe County. So any ideas on such a simple and straightforward question?
Yeah. Well, so I think that a place that we might consider starting at the bigger level is looking at reducing, or I guess it would be increasing the amount of allowable assets that people can have in order to be able to access social safety net programs. What we find with many of the people that we serve at MCUM is that they make $1 too much an hour, and then because of that they are excluded from hundreds of dollars worth of social safety net programs. And the unfortunate part about that is that this is something called the cliff effect, and so this is something that they're not quite at a self-sufficiency wage, which is local. It's for local cost of living, but they're doing great according to federal poverty line standards. And I don't think that we, the collective we, are as organized as we could be around, okay, how do we help people push back against this system that basically, and this goes again to the cost of being poor. People make the choice, a lot of people make the choice to get rid of their assets or to take lower paying jobs because they can access the social safety net, which goes against the stigma that we have as a society for what sound financial decision making is. And then as social service agencies or government benefits programs, we think that the answer is, oh, we need to teach people how to manage their money. And that's horrible, because it's a mess. So I think working on asset exemption so that people are allowed to have a car or a second car if you have two adults in the household working 2 different jobs and toting children to 5 different places, and that kind of thing. I think allowing people to have a primary residence as an asset exemption would be a great start, because everyone deserves to have a home. That's a basic need. And then I also think that I see bits and pieces of optimism in a lot of, it's been mentioned, we keep a lot of policies because we like having policies about things, but I look at, as a nonprofit organization, we apply for a lot of grants, and as a nonprofit organization, we are constantly asked to prove that the people that we're serving really are poor and really need help, which sort of forces us to get into the weeds and ask people why they're poor, why they need help, which the whole point of the book is that's not the whole point, but a big point of the book is that's not a great thing to do. There's a lot of reasons for that, and it doesn't fit in these clean little boxes that we like to have for people. And so, but then I also see parts where I think we see hints of getting it right. Like in one of our local grant programs, in order to be eligible for funding and receive funding, we have to prove that the contractors that we work with on physical improvement projects pay their workers a living wage. That's great. I'm happy to do that. But I would also love to see funders say, you know what, people that work at nonprofit organizations and at other places that are doing this good work also deserve to make a living wage. Wouldn't it be great if we would fund operational expenses if this organization has already proved that they're doing a lot of the work? So it's not a simple question, and there is no simple answer, just like the constant piling on of problems that the author mentions. I think that all of us who are doing the work, living the experience, are also kind of getting the counter effects of the constant piling on of problems. And so the solution is not just untangling the problem for that person experiencing it, but it's also being an advocate, being a poverty abolitionist, but making sure that we don't act too far out of line, because ultimately without funding we can't do our work either. And so it's a big mess, and that's not very optimistic. I'm sorry.
All of what she just said. So I guess, okay, for me, I guess the idea of being a poverty abolitionist while living in poverty is kind of a conundrum of its own. And I feel like I put a lot of effort into making sure that people understand some of the niches that living, like I said, I came up in middle class, I went to private school, but it's just the little things that I've had to learn, which I guess kind of makes it a little different for me, because I'm learning these things, I'm figuring things out, all these systems, and it's really a game. Being poor is really a game that you have to play. I always say that I feel like I'm always robbing Peter to pay Paul, and so that work it's hard for me to actively participate in while I'm experiencing it. experiencing it, but I think that for our community here in Bloomington, I feel like housing is the biggest way that we fight that. And when I say housing, I really think that it's ridiculous what people are able to charge in rent in our community. And I get it, I get it that we got this big college in town, so you got people sending their kids here who are willing to pay just about anything for their kids to live where they want. But the rents here are, when you compare the rent to the wages for just your regular people here in this community, it is impossible. I really lucked up on where I live just because of relationship building, but under any other circumstance, I would not have the comfort or security that I have. In the last 5 years, I've lived in the same house, and while everybody is raising rents, my landlord has not done that. And even with that, my portion of my rent is more than his mortgage. Yeah, and wages are another area that I think that really need to be looked at. And it's hard to just put it out there, but people are working hard for nothing. And I do know people who consciously make that decision not to work or to work less hours, or, there are games you have to play. Okay, I know that my recertification is coming up, so how about I call off a couple days this month, and I got to call off a couple days this month just so I can make sure that my gross income stays under that line. I've been kind of, I guess it's a warning for the last 2 years. Well, if you make any more money, then you're probably not going to be eligible for this again. Well, okay, but my situation hasn't changed, and some other things that I just like to point out that there are a lot of factors that a lot of our social systems do not take into account when considering these things. Early on, when I first came to Bloomington, my oldest child, who's now 23, was in college. She was in college at Purdue on a full ride scholarship, and I was staying at the Rise, and I want to say, yeah, it had to be August, right? So school's about to start, and she needed $500 to be able to enroll in classes. Everything else is paid for. This $500 comes up. I'm gonna pay it, right? So I pay it, and I'm like, okay, well, I was new to Bloomington, but I've heard of all these programs that'll, I should be able to get some help with my rent. And I went to the township trustee, and I thought it was a no-brainer. Yeah, I'm here because I need help with my rent this month. My daughter is going to college, and she needed this money to be able to enroll in classes, and so I had to take it from my rent money. And they didn't pay it. And they told me that I needed to make better choices. And I'm like, I don't really see where the better choice is in that. And currently, I had a daughter who graduated last year. She was dealing with some mental health issues, so she's not currently enrolled in school, plans to enroll in school, but we got to deal with that, right? Meanwhile, she has a part-time job. I don't charge her anything. I don't, make her pay any of the household bills. But in the meantime, because she has that job, it's income from my home. So rent goes up, food stamps go down. You know, now I'm technically considered a 2-adult household, and like it just impacts everything. And how do you anticipate for those types of things? So I mean, I think speaking on these things, it's not enough, like, because the change has to be at a systemic level, and I don't like Desmond says in the book, it's too much for the people who are making the decisions to give up, to even consider.
Thank you. Oh boy, I have like 2 pages of stuff. I won't read them all. I have so many different ideas, and I was talking to Forrest before the panel started, and I was just saying, you know, it seems like such a tough nut to crack, right? Because we're dealing with things that we want to change on the federal level, things that the ways the state hamstrings us by basically not allowing localities to mandate inclusionary zoning, for instance. And so it just seems insurmountable sometimes. And I used to teach a policy course to social work students, and they weren't very excited about an assignment to talk to an elected official, because they were like, what's the point, you know? And so we really focused on local. We focused on our city politics, county politics, and that seemed to be a little more tangible for folks to be able to get involved in. So I just think about things on a local level, and I routinely speak at county commissioner, county council meetings, city council meetings. You know, there are things I continue to try to pressure local officials to center equity, right? So for me, there's some local things that could be done. I really liked Matthew Desmond's talk about how so many people qualify for these programs, but it's so complicated to enroll and to actually come up with all the paperwork and all the forms and follow this through. And we really need more people in our community doing that kind of work. I think we could get it funded. I'm not sure exactly where, but I think we need to do more of it, and not just have it be somewhere where you make an appointment, but to come to the families, to do things in the community. I know that, Katie, you just did a resource fair of some sort at the library, which I think is awesome, and just trying to let people know what opportunities there are for assistance. Also, for those of us in organizations where we're applying for grants and we're trying to set up ways in which we can help people, I would just encourage nonprofits as much as possible to do things that are no strings attached. Don't require hoops for folks to jump through. There is a wonderful project called Magnolia Mothers Trust in Jackson, Mississippi, that said, you know what, we're going to actually give black mothers in public housing $1,000 a month for a year, and we're going to research that. And those mothers did amazing things. The outcomes are fantastic. And the folks said, you know, you just need to trust people. They will do the right thing with that money. And I don't know if any of you have heard of Linda Tirado, but she wrote Hand to Mouth and the Bootstrap America, and she talked about her experience with poverty and said, you know, I had mold or flood in my house, and I really wanted furniture, and she said, I just had it in my mind, if I just got another chair, that would really, you know, make my living quarters more comfortable. And so she contacted an organization, and they said, yeah, we'll give you a chair, but we want you to attend our workshop on how to get a job. And she said, well, I have a job, so I can't come on Tuesday at 3 for your thing. And they're like, well, no, that's really a requirement that we have. If we're, you know, we want to make sure people have job skills. So, I mean, it's just that nonsensical hoop jumping, right? You know, there were organizations that made people prove whether they were documented in order to get food and assistance. And, you know, when I was doing social work, I would avoid those places, right? So anyway, making it easier for people to access the benefits that they should deserve. I'd love to see a pilot in Bloomington where we just give people cash. It's been going on since 2018, by the way. They've had multiple, they're really, look it up, it's amazing. So also, I just want to center some comments on the criminal legal system. And right now, we're having a big conversation in Bloomington. Many of you have probably heard about building a new jail. Okay. The mental gymnastics folks are making, in my opinion, to spend $80+ million on a new jail is pretty amazing. So imagine what we could do with $80+ million to keep people out of cages. And folks are really putting this lovely spin on it, as we do in Bloomington. It's going to be nicer. We're going to have treatment in the jail. We're going to have more services. And I don't know, I don't trust our jails and prisons to actually be those kind, nice places we're all wanting it to be so that we can feel good about building more cages. We have a facility that we don't have an idea what it would actually cost to fix. Nobody's gotten a thorough assessment. And they keep saying we need more room, it's full. There's also some consultant reports that talk about these are the 20 things you could do to lower your jail population. We have problems in Monroe County that we could tackle and not be putting people in jail who have substance use disorder, nonviolent offenses, misdemeanors, that are in jail because of revocations, because they missed an appointment with a probation officer. They can't pay their users' fees. So, you know, let's work on those things, and in the meantime, keep what we've got and make it as safe as possible. And but I've been to so many meetings where they're so excited to talk about the paint colors on the wall and how they're going to make nicer windows. And I want people to get the help and the treatment, but I also know that putting people in a cage is not optimal. I'm a mental health professional. That is not where people go to get better. There are other ways to do it. We can hold people accountable and we can keep our communities safe with evidence-based approaches, such as restorative justice, transformative justice. There are many, many things we could do. I believe we should all be safe, but we need to really be looking into other methods to keep our folks safe. On-demand detox would be an absolute dream. And we used to have on-demand detox in Bloomington years ago. When people want to change, they have to have a place to go right now. What is the first question people are asked when they call up and say, I want to get help? What's your insurance? Now, I'm sorry, when you're in a crisis, and I have a family member who has a substance use disorder, when you're in crisis and somebody wants to change, the last thing you're doing is calling up 20,000 places, figuring out who will take your insurance and what place is reputable. And, you know, this is a huge problem. So, just stop the fees, stop the cash bail, let's try to avoid criminalizing substance use, because if we recognize it as a disease, which it is, why are we punishing folks for being sick? So, also, something really popular reform that a lot of folks want to talk about who are liberal, and again, I know I'm going to alienate myself from people, but is drug court. They talk about, we want to encourage problem-solving courts. We want folks with substance use disorder to be treated in a way that is focusing on their mental health and their substance use disorder. But folks that I know who have been through the system refer to those as problem-making courts. They're very rigid, and people will often end up spending more time under surveillance and control and paying these fees than if they would have just taken the deal without the drug court. So a lot of people will recommend folks don't do it. Also, you know, while I maybe think everybody should be sober, that's not exactly how it works. There's harm reduction efforts that actually are evidence-based, that are very effective in helping people get to, if it's not recovery, at least a safer way, and keep our community safer. And when somebody is in drug court, it's abstinence only, or very few exceptions. So if you want to check, if you're a researcher, look at James Kilgore's research on drug courts. So also, just a very small change, the county council has a contract with a for-profit company that mandates that people have money on their books in order to visit with somebody. So they only get to have a phone call or a tablet, and it's a for-profit company. So if you're poor, forget being connected to your family members while you're incarcerated. And that's a contract that our county folks approve. Anyway, I could talk more. There's also, let's stop calling the police for everything, please. Let's meet, let's know our neighbors, talk to our neighbors, really evaluate, as I'm uncomfortable, but am I unsafe? And so we have mobile crisis units that I would feel better if they were all disassociated with law enforcement, but there's a 988 number that everybody's going, yay, we finally have this 988. Well, there was just a recent study that said 30% of people who ever called 988 for a crisis situation would ever call it again, because it's still really being routed through law enforcement. We haven't fully funded our crisis response in Bloomington. So get to know your neighbors and find other ways to address disturbances when at all possible. And let's just get some public toilets in Bloomington, please. That's some other things. So anyway, I'm going to end it there. I have a lot of ideas.
I'm not going to be that good. I think, gosh, I mean, so how do we focus on it individuals is hard. I think we have to get back into, I think we have to really take advocacy seriously, and we can't ignore the fact that a lot of our problems are created on the federal level, and that even though it's very powerful, we can do things locally. We have to, a good percentage of the injustice around our tax system is on the federal and state level in terms of how things are done, and that determines how money is directed to people, and that's really important, and we can't continue to allow massive tax breaks for the wealthiest among us and have people so underfunded in the poverty alleviation programs that really work. Right now in our community, there was a great study by Regional Opportunities Initiative some years ago, and they did a study in Monroe County, and they took the incomes of the community, and they took the apartment availability in the community and the price ranges, and then they compared those, and they figured out what price ranges for rent should we have, based on the income levels of our community. And they found something really interesting. They found that we had, and this is a couple years out of date now, but they found that we had more housing than we needed in the 400 to 800 rental range, which was strange, like what? But we actually have more than we needed based on people's income in our community. But on top of that, what they found, but yet we have, a very low vacancy rate to no vacancy rate in that range. And what they then found is that in the 0 to 400 range, we had an incredible shortage of housing. Most affordable housing is built in that 0 to 800 range and a little bit higher now. That was 2017 data, so this is a little outdated. And rents have gone up quite a bit the last several years, especially through the pandemic and after. So we're building affordable housing in the range that's too expensive for people already. We're not building in the right affordable housing range. So that's a huge mistake. And while I think there are, we've been talking a lot about market benefits and things we can change to make the market work better. And I do think, duplexes and things I think have a place in our community, and quads have a place in our community, triplexes, et cetera, that missing middle housing. That is never going to solve that 0 to 400 rental range property because it costs too much to build housing. You can't build housing at that level in the free market. It's just impossible. It's just the costs are too expensive and you can't do it. So the only way you can deal with that is to subsidize rent in that range. There's no other way to deal with that without, you know, either subsidizing or massively increasing people's incomes. And so right now, the best way that we do that in our country is called a housing choice voucher, sometimes called Section 8, housing choice voucher. And it's one of the most effective housing support kind of assistance, whatever, aid support that we have, benefits that we have in our country. It's very effective at keeping people housed for a long time at low cost. Like it's better than most other models. And right now, for every 5 people in our country who are eligible for a housing choice voucher, there's only one voucher. So we're way underfunding the housing need, like way underfunding the housing need. And that's like, oh, well, let's try and do that. But here's the thing, like right now, even the amount of people who do have vouchers is an incredible high rate of, I don't know what the right term is, but unuse, that they lose the voucher because they're not able to find a place to actually move into. Mary, what is it, 40% or something? What's the? So 38% of people who receive vouchers can't get an apartment to actually use the voucher in. So so more than 1 in 3. So so I don't know if maybe, what is that, 1 in 15? If the math, sorry if I just screwed that math up royally, but a lot of people basically are not getting the vouchers they need and the support they need at that level. And so that's just one example of something that I think we could fundamentally change in our country. And again, if we shift how we have the money, but we've chosen to put it over here instead of over here. And so it's not like the money's not there, it's there. So we just need to redirect on the federal level and state level how taxes are spent.
I had one more idea that I wanted to share, because this is a salient issue in Bloomington right now. So we need more childcare. We need more pre-K spots. We need to support our public schools. I know some folks have had some disagreements lately about scheduling. I know I'm stepping in it. But there are things that as a democracy we should demand from our school system and be engaged and have our disagreements. But I really urge folks to support the referendum. If you haven't already voted, please vote yes. We need those pre-K spots desperately, and you please take up your other disagreements with the school at the school board meetings or in emails to the superintendent. But childcare is a huge need. Also, we don't have 24/7 childcare here for folks, single parents who need some place. They work in the healthcare field, maybe some 12-hour shifts or overnight, third shift. We need childcare that's available for those hours as well. So.
All right, final question for you all. So even the one things, even if we picked one of these, there's a lot of heavy lifting. And Desmond states in his epilogue that poverty will only be abolished in America when a mass movement demands it so. So it takes a lot more than what we have gathered here, let's just say. But it is about connecting our communities. It's about building movements. It's about increasing people power. So what is your dream for this in Bloomington? How do we start building those connections? How do we start, or even if you know of places that it's already happening, how do we continue to increase that movement making? How can we invest in those spaces so we can actually, even one of those issues, like I said, it would take a lot more than those who are just gathered here. How do we start connecting one to another? What would your dream, your vision for that be?
That is also not a simple question. I want to go back to high quality childcare for a minute here and start there. I think that if you haven't voted on that referendum yet, I also strongly urge you to support it. A lack of childcare is a huge barrier to employment, to prosperity in a whole bunch of different ways. And in Monroe County, I think the most recent statistic is something like only 1 out of every 4 children from ages 0 through 5 years old in the county have a spot in a licensed high-quality early learning center. And for anyone who doesn't have young children, you might think, what's the big deal? Why does it need to be high quality? What difference does that make? If I have, and it's funny to ask it like that, because it's like, well, duh, of course it has to be high quality. I can't leave my child with just anyone, but a lot of parents make the choice to send their child either to be with a neighbor or a family member or something like that. And it's not that that's not a high quality person, not saying that, but when your choice is to have someone that you know watch your child for low or no cost versus pay the $330 that it costs a week. And yes, that is, I have a baby, and that's how much I have paid at a center before to have her there. You're gonna make the choice that your pocketbook or your bank account tells you have to make. And you're gonna do your best to make sure that your child is safe, okay? That's the most important thing. But when a child is ready for their first day of kindergarten, they are more likely to be set up for a lifetime of positive outcomes. That can include higher wages as adults, less dependence on social safety net programs, and a whole bunch of other things. So it'd be a good start to make sure that every child has the start they need. Yes?
I just want to say, some people don't know, of course there's a municipal election, but if you live anywhere in the county except Richmond's E-Plus, you can still vote in
Yes.
the referendum. So just because you don't live in the city doesn't mean you can't vote, and you should get all your friends who live out in the country with you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I think really investing in high quality early learning programs is a great place to start. For those of you who are working, and if anybody works for especially any of the larger companies like the hospital or Cook or any of these places that have 24-hour work, there is a grant right now through the FSSA that's out. Encourage these employers to apply for it. It's giving funding so that they can help their employees find and pay for high quality childcare spots. And for a place like the hospital or Cook, it'd be great if they had a high quality early learning center right there in those locations. And that's what that funding is for, so please encourage them to apply for that. Okay, so that's the childcare piece of it. I also want to go back to a basic cash assistance stipend or something like that. And since we're in, you asked, what the dream is, what the goal is. I love living in dreamland. One of the things that we've been working on at MCUM is we did a pilot program this fall and over the summer called the Opportunity Fund. And the whole premise of this was for people who needed money to tell us how much money they needed and what they might like to use it for. There were no strings attached. They didn't have to pay it back. They didn't have to prove a bunch of stuff. It was just, my child who, is a 5-year-old at the Compass Early Learning Center would like to play soccer, or I would like to pay off the debt that I owe from my predatory loans, or my car is broken and I need to fix it. And so what we saw with that program was that every single recipient who received funding chose to either consolidate or pay off their debt, which then made them much better off in the long run, or they used it to repair a vehicle. That was another big one. There's not a lot of programs locally that will help with transportation related needs, so that was really helpful for them. But then the other thing, and Matthew Desmond talks a bit about this in the book as well, is looking for opportunities to create social capital. And my interpretation of what he means by that is to create engagement between people across income levels. And so for us, what that looked like was giving a family some funding so that their kids could do sports and have those opportunities with other children that might have otherwise been just a bit too far out of reach for them. And so my dream and what we're kind of working on at MCUM would be to look at coordinating our efforts with other agencies that are doing great work. I think one of the most difficult things can be to recognize that as social service providers, we can have the best intentions and have a lot of big dreams and want to accomplish a lot of things, but we will be spinning our wheels forever if we think that it's even possible for us to be all things to all people. For example, Forest's organization is really good at housing. MCUM is not good at helping people find housing. We're good at connecting people with Forest if that's what they need. But that's what I mean. I think being able to take a breath and recognize, you know what, I'm not the expert of this person is, and to create more closed loop referral systems for people who need the support instead of just kind of name dropping and passing people off from one organization to the next. Another example of what I mean by that is, so at MCUM, we serve the little tiny children. Once they hit age 5 and age out of our early learning center, technically they are age eligible and hopefully, otherwise interested and able to get to the Boys and Girls Club, which is right down the street. My great goal would be for those of us that work for nonprofit organizations to start having conversations about, okay, if a child, starts at the Compass Early Learning Center, I can set them up from ages 1 through 5. Can you take them from ages 5 through 18? And then by that time, we have an adult. We've provided services, wraparound services to this person for their entire life at that point, and maybe they can get out of poverty if they're in it. So I think thinking about things more collaboratively is a really good start, and thinking about the whole person and the whole picture of what that looks like, and also recognizing that everyone cannot be an expert of everything. And what we do have a lot of in Bloomington is a lot of people who care very much and are very passionate about the issues and the cause areas that they work in. And I think really leaning into that and working together is going to accomplish a lot more than just living in our little silos with the best of intentions and doing the best we can. We will spin our wheels forever doing that.
So I think that relationships is the biggest piece to this, and it is why I have found so much comfort in being involved in Thriving Connections. Just a little bit about the setup of that. You have a group of people who are living in poverty, and then you have a group of what we call allies. And we go into the same space every week, like building these intentional relationships. There are so many people who don't understand that experience of poverty, who have the best of intentions, and don't understand all the idiosyncrasies of the system that like create all these barriers. And so the biggest piece for me is that you need to talk to people who are experiencing these and then find how you can help. And that help is not always about like, here's some money, do what you need to do. And I'm not saying that money is not a big part of the solution. The part that's most important to me is making people understand, so that that is what's on their mind when they find themselves in a room with another person who doesn't understand that. When they find themselves in rooms with people who have power to change policy. People who are poor don't have the time to do all the things. Like, I know I do a lot, but at the end of the day, there are so many rooms that I would like to be in that I have to say, oh no, I can't do that today. One, because I gotta be supportive to a kid somewhere that's doing something, and two, just because when I don't have to be somewhere supporting the kid, then I should find myself at home taking care of my children. And I do find time, and today is an example of me taking the time to explain things like that. But I think that those relationships, I have so many people in my life that that are really fighting poverty, like really fighting poverty, and I can appreciate that. When you feel like you are really involved in that fight, just one question I always like to throw this out there, like, have you ever had a poor person at your home? Like, you know, because we're fighting this, and these are my friends, so, and I think that I want to help these people, but do you care enough to invite them into your home? Like, and if the answer to that question is no, then I think there's a lot of self-reflection just in that. Another piece that we really didn't touch on, and it really doesn't pertain to the question, but I just want to bring it up, is that is his piece on the solutions, and how many different ways he was able to break down how, like, we would be able to almost eradicate poverty if it was just a choice that we made. The biggest one that he talked about was enforcing tax laws that already exist. And that was just like mind-blowing to me, and like, I work in finance, so I see that, and I know that that a lot of that it benefits a lot of people. Tax law doesn't really benefit me, but it does benefit a lot of people. But there's so many solutions that are so doable that we choose to not. That is just that was my takeaway. Like, that yes, in America, poverty is a part of the system that allows capitalism to and I mean, like, not against capitalism, but I mean, I think that there has to be, you know, like, you've made it, like, and beyond that, like, why? Like, why is it so important that I just keep hoarding resources?
Thank you, Asia. I I also want to talk about intentional relationships and building those relationships. I think it's something that all of us can do. I know you're all here because this is a faith, people of faith, and we do that in our houses of worship. We often, get together with people that we may have differences with, but we build those relationships. And so I would encourage you to find other ways to expand being able to do that. Thriving Connections would be very happy to have more allies join. We have new cohorts coming up all the time of folks who have chosen to participate. You go through a lot of classes, and there's a lot of preparation work and support that goes into this, but it has been an absolutely enriching and rewarding experience for me. I think this really goes along with what you were saying, Asia. We need to listen to the people that are impacted, that have been marginalized, oppressed, or struggling, instead of come up with our own ideas about what's best for people. And that goes for folks who have substance use disorder, mental health issues, poverty. We have to start respecting people's lived experience and give people agency over their lives. And when we do that, and when people feel empowered, they make better decisions. They're healthier. And so, listen for those voices. And a lot of times when I've been having conversations about what to do about our jail and our criminal legal system, people are like, well, I've talked to a lot of people about this, and they all say we need a new jail. I'm like, have you talked to people who have been incarcerated? Yeah, they wanted a nicer place, but would you ask them, was there something else that could have helped you? There's a lot of other things that could have helped people. So, of course, if I worked in the criminal legal system and I had to work in that building, I'd probably want something nice and new too. So we have to center our decision-making on equity. It's not easy. We all claim to do it, but we have to take some steps back and really use our critical thinking about who is this going to benefit. And I think when we were able to do that, we're much more clear on the answer, and it's not the easy answers. Doing the right thing is never easy, and I have disagreed with a lot of people I respect in the community, and I haven't made, maybe lost some friends, but I'm still insistent that what we're doing needs to result in equity for people and a safer and better community. But most of the time we all want the same things, but we're really stuck in the minutia about how to go about it. The Bloomington liberals are the worst. We eat each other up, we care about things, and then somehow we disagree and we're ousted. I mean, there's a lot of cliquey organizing in Bloomington. Forrest might have some knowledge of that, but it's really hard, and to join together with those that we have some differences of opinion about. But if we can center equity and we can listen to those the most impacted, we can do it. Interfaith organizing has actually made some of the most incredible changes throughout history in regards to poverty. So I think there's a lot of power in this space. And for those who didn't come here today, I'm sure that you could enlist others' support in trying to address some of the issues you've heard about today. We can't do everything all the time, but we can find ways that to get involved in things that we care about and we might have some connection to. So the Unitarian Universalist Church has a group called Hope for Prisoners, I believe, and they write letters and do some things. I'm looking at you because you were there today, but some of you may be familiar with that. But if you care about people who are stuck in the criminal legal system, consider joining up with that group and finding ways to help. We do letter writing and things like that and support for people who are incarcerated. You can also volunteer with the library in the Read to Me program if you want to help folks read books to their kiddos. There are lots of ways that we can join together and do many of these things. Also, one thing we haven't talked about, and again, I'm not sure if this answers the question, but we have a huge problem in Indiana with our medical system and medical debt. And healthcare is an extremely important issue, and I know it feels overwhelming to think about how we're going to make change on the on the federal level, but there is an organization called the Indiana Health Fund that pays off people's medical debt. It's the number 2 reason for people to file personal bankruptcy, and before the Affordable Care Act, it was the number 1 reason. So we need to connect people. A South Central Community Action Program has some healthcare navigators that will help connect people to insurance, but we can also try to route people to the Indiana Health Fund and get their medical debt paid for. So anyway, there's so many things to care about, and I'm just really pleased to see all of you here, and I have hope for our community in addressing these really hard issues.
I would say don't recreate the wheel, and look to organizations that already exist and support them and lift them up, as opposed to trying to make a new group. I think the Poor People's Campaign on a national level is a good organization to kind of work around poverty issues, and it certainly, I think that Poor People's Campaign needs some strength in Indiana in particular. So I think it's a group that can connect with federal impact, but also state level impact if we can build up more of a group within Indiana on an advocacy level. And then locally, it gets more complicated. I think Asia was right on the money in terms of that people experiencing poverty are already struggling with just survival. And so then to kind of create scenarios that also require extra work for advocacy, that's very difficult and very challenging. And any movement that's worth its salt has to be led by people who are living that experience. And so that is one of the reasons why particularly anti-poverty advocacy has been challenging in our country, and I think has gotten harder because we've made it harder and harder for people in poverty to survive. Child care is a reason, the lack of it, and one of the things we've seen is while real wages have stayed relatively the same going back, 30, 40 years, 50 years pre-Reagan, what hasn't stayed the same are costs. So the cost of child care has gone way up, the cost of health care has gone way up, the cost of education has gone way up, the cost of food has gone up, the cost of housing has gone way up. So people are making the same money, but relatively speaking, but everything costs, the basics of survival stuff costs way more, and that creates this tremendous burden on people based on their income. So where I'm coming from on that is like, think small when what's very immediate. It could be like a stop sign, that where the road's dangerous, or something like that, working with a community to find out what their challenge is. And some of them are like, I don't like this road, it's driving too fast, or it could be, small tenant organizations, trying to work with apartment complexes that house people with who are more impoverished, helping them organize. We can push for a hand type organization at the county level that actually regulates for quality standards in housing outside of the city, because right now the standards for living outside of the city are only enforced by the Department of Health, and those are very minimal compared to the things that the city says, this is a decent place to live, and you can't run a place if you don't have that quality of housing. That doesn't exist in the county anywhere near the same level. So those are just some kind of small, if you will, local places that you could kind of maybe target and focus on.
Well, thank you all. Clearly there's a lot of passion here. and a lot of really great insight. I know for me, I've always think that people who have the most proximity often have the ability to speak and to tell stories that are able to kind of open up new conversations too. So we're really grateful for all of your experiences and all your sharing today. We are, because we're so passionate about, we have a lot of things to discuss. I do know that we are running a little tight on time, but I did want to open up for a few questions for Q&A. I'm going to bring the microphone around though, because we do have a few folks online. So. And to the panelists, not all of you need to answer as well, but feel free to pass around the microphone.
I have a pretty big voice, but this is not a question, it's rather a statement. And the mom there that shared that she has 6 children and the expenses and the needing the $500 for a college application. I just want to remind you that the referendum addresses that. It's not just about childcare. I'm a retired school counselor, and for those kids who need to take AP tests, one AP test costs over $100. So if I happen to have a granddaughter, she's taking 4 AP classes. She can afford that. But when you're living in poverty, you can't afford that. So the referendum addresses poverty. And it really has disturbed me the last 2 or 3 weeks when there's been so much negativity about the referendum, and it's because the school hasn't presented an exact plan of how they're going to use this. I would say trust your school. Trust the people that are hired there to administer programs, because this is a referendum about poverty. And if we vote it down, we are making a statement that this community isn't as great as we think it is. And before COVID hit, I was calling homes to tell parents that that their lunch account was in negative. And what I did mostly was to get those parents to sign up for free and reduced lunch because they didn't know about it. I don't think most people are aware that 35% of the children in Bloomington schools live in poverty. They qualify for free and reduced lunch.
It's even higher now, yeah.
Okay, I called a couple years ago because I was testifying for some bill at the state legislature, and they told me then 35%. So we have a lot of wealth in this community, and we have a lot of poverty. And I think people tend to think of poverty as the homeless people down in Seminary Square. That's not true. So keep that in mind. I so appreciate that you were here today to share your story.
Yes, the current statistic is over 50%. And I just want to say to all of you, thank you. The work you do every day makes a huge difference.
On page 182 of Desmond's book, I think it's the first paragraph of chapter 7 or chapter 8, I think it's chapter 7. It's comprised of a wonderful statement that could be a policy statement for any faith community or non-for-profit that specifies what poverty abolition can look like. And I would encourage those of you who are part of a faith community to look at that page 182 and use it to formulate a policy statement, or some faith communities call it a confessional statement, about where your faith community stands on poverty abolition.
It's easy to say that there isn't a solution, and I think he lays the solution out very simply. We're subsidizing the rich. We're impoverishing the poor. There is plenty of money if we first make people pay their taxes, get rid of, we have no, you got to have $10 million before the estate tax kicks in. If you sell stock, you pay half the wages of somebody else who's out there, half the taxes of somebody who's out there working. We have, and the Republican House, of course, just voted to defund the Internal Revenue Service because they hate taxes. They hate good government, and my personal view is the racist agenda and the anti-poverty agenda are what divide this country, and why the Republican people who have no interest in keeping poor people poor have joined the rich is a conundrum. But there is enough money. It just takes, and as they say in Texas, it's not that we're a Republican state, we're a non-voting state. If we can just get people to get out there and vote, we have plenty of votes all through this country to abolish poverty.
I would like to point out two things. My voice is giving me a hard time. I came down with it cold. One of the good things that came out of this, and one of the things that I recommend, that we educate ourselves. Because after we read this book, and many people read this book, how many things that we didn't know that we know now. So to know is very powerful. It gives you a lot of power. Only when you know can you make change. The other thing, the second thing I would like to share with you is that I'm a very optimistic person, but I am really giving up on capitalism. Capitalism you just mentioned. And unfortunately for the world, when it gets to this point, and I'm afraid it's going to happen here in America, when the rich get, just keeping rich, billionaires, there's no ceiling. They keep going. There's no limit. More and more. The only solution is a bloody revolution. And I'm really afraid, and I don't want to be alarmist, but I'm really afraid if things don't change, it's going to be a bloody revolution, like the likes of what happened in Russia, or in France, or in China. They are people like us, and America is not immune, although America has this conception about itself that it, manifests destiny. We are unique. We're different from the rest of the world. No, you're not different from the rest of the world. You are like everybody else. And greed for more and more is what kills societies. And for the last few years, the rich have been getting richer, and the poor have been getting poorer. And the end game is a bloody revolution. People will get to a point where they can't take it anymore. They will lose that fear. And once they lose fear, when you corner people, that's what's going to happen. I want to be out of here before then.
Last one.
Yes, the whole time I was reading Poverty by America, I kept thinking, well, who cares? Does anybody, I'm sorry, at least 50% of the population of this country doesn't care if people are getting poor. In fact, they like the fact that the poor are increasing, because the poorer you are, the less political power you have. And as you say, if you make a mistake in applying for welfare, you're threatened, with prosecution. Brett Favre stole $5 million in anti-poverty funds, and when I saw that, I said, he will never spend a day in jail. Not only is he not being criminally prosecuted, he faces possible civil fines. That's the situation we have in this country. The people in power want poverty.
Well, we are grateful for all the for all of your insight. Clearly, like we said, this is an area of strong passion for this community, and we want to continue to grow on that. If you hadn't had an opportunity to sign in, to leave your name and information, we'd really like for you to do so in the back. We don't intend to be emailing you every week or anything like that. What we want to do is invite you to continue this conversation with us. The Bloomington Multi-faith Faith for Racial Equity group meets twice a month on Thursdays at noon, the first and third or second and fourth. Yeah, that's how that goes. Thursdays at noon. And we're interested in starting a new project potentially based off of some of the information today, and we would love your input. But we also, the second and fourth Thursdays, we also would like to build kind of a group that might be interested in more events like this, one-off things, one-off projects that might come out of that. So we'd love for you to leave your information. We'll invite you to one meeting. You can choose or not. And beyond that, we just want to continue to have this conversation and to continue to invite you to be a part of it. With that, I do want to say thank you to all of our speakers. We're grateful for your time today, and we also want to be respectful of your time today. There's going to be continued conversation. We invite you to join us in Heritage Hall. Out the doors to the right, there's some refreshments. Have a conversation with someone you don't know, or maybe you do. Share a little bit more about your passion around this area. We'd love to just continue this conversation and invite you to continue to make Bloomington a place that more and more can thrive, not just continue to survive. So thank you all for your time on this beautiful Sunday, and thank you for your continued work and working towards becoming poverty abolitionists. So thank you.